Okay, welcome back, everyone, as we continue in the Tzurba series, and we're in the middle of Hilchot of Muktzeh, and today we're going to go back into the shir that we're holding up, shir bet of Hilchot Muktzeh, shir vav overall. We're really going to pick up on page 269, but before we pick up on page 269, we'll do a little bit of a chazara using the back of the shir, and that will be on page 291. Okay, so tonight's shir Be'ezrat Hashem is dedicated in loving memory of Nikedam Bat Osnat. Her neshama should have an aliyah, and she should go Michael Began Eden, and she should be an advocate for all of Klal Yisrael, especially for her family and her son Yosef, who put together this beautiful arrangement on this table. And everyone should make barachot, Leilu Nishmat, Nekedam, Bat Osnat. All right, so let us begin. We are going to be starting on page 291, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a chazara of what we learned last week. Last week was a little bit of a loud class, and I think we may have not come out so clearly. So let's look at what we learned. The first category Muktzeh that we spoke about last week was what's known as kli shemelachto leheter. This is a vessel that is used for a permissible melacha on Shabbat. And we saw from Masechet Shabbat, we saw from the Rambam, that codifies the law that you're allowed to move it for its place or for its use or even to protect it. Okay? So a chair is a kli shemelachto leheter. I'm allowed to move the chair if I want to sit in it. I'm allowed to move the chair if I need the place where the chair is. And I'm allowed to move the chair in order for it not to get rained on or something to happen to protect it. The Maggid Mishnah sees a diuk in this. And he says, the way the Rambam and the way the Gemara brings down the halacha, it's if there is a reason to move it, then you're allowed to move it. The reason is I want to use it. The reason is I need the place. Or the reason is I need to protect it. But to stop move it for no reason, that should not be allowed. Chair, anything that's known as a kli shemelachto leheter, table, chair. Right. To move it for no reason, you can't do that. Okay?
Maybe somebody fidgets with something.
Right. As long as he's moving it. No, we're going to say that's not a reason. The reason has to be either its place, its usage, or to protect it. Anything else is not called a usage, and then you can't move it.
Everybody agrees with this sheet?
So everyone does agree with this, yes. The question is, how far is this? Meaning, is this all kli shemelachto leheter? So the Ran says that, and the Shulchan Aruch brings as well, that's true, but not to food or svarim. Food, right? First of all, it's not a kli, okay, number one. But even if you want to say it was a kli in the sense of being something, it's still, gezerah of Muktzeh never was put on it. And therefore, it's not just a kli shemelachto leheter, it's something that's permissible to move even for no reason. So I can go ahead and move this bachsh back and forth 1,000 times in Shabbat just to move it for no reason whatsoever. That I could do. I could take the apple, I could juggle the apple for no reason. Okay? That I'm allowed to do. Because there was never a gezerah of it being a kli shemelachto leheter, any issues of Muktzeh regarding it. And the same thing is true with Sfarim. Okay? So the Ran and the Shulchan Aruch bring that. It's very good. So Tosfot says the truth is that also should apply to vessels you use for food. Okay, so when Nehemiah and the others made the gezerahs of Muktzeh, they never put it on food vessels like on forks and knives. You needed to eat. You need to eat with something. So you use more. Of course, those are not going to be a Muktzeh at all. It's not going to be kli shemelachto leheter. You're allowed to move it around even for no reason. In fact, in source number 5 in the Chazara, Shiltei Giborim says one may move these vessels even for no purpose. So food vessels, vessels that you use to hold food or to use with food, should be no problem of moving them even for no purpose. The Mishnah Berurah says no. Some prohibit moving the utensils for no purpose. Mishnah Berurah says there are still those who say no, and that in fact is the opinion of Chacham Ovadia. Chacham Ovadia held that you're not allowed to move around cups, plates, spoons, forks for no reason whatsoever. If you need to move it for using it for its space, to protect it, no problem. But to move it around for no reason, no. Okay, so not learning like the Tosfot, more like the Maggid Mishnah. Okay, just to take a look 1 second. Oh, yeah. So turn back to page 260 in the Shir, just to look at the way the Chazon Ovadia brings down this halacha. Page 260 in the Shir in the Tzurba, and it says, "Kalim shemalachtem leheter, kegoyin koisa oimel shtia v'kaaros etzilach koisa medis loichel behen v'sachen omedis lechatayich ba'al lechem oy baser muter letatlam b'shabbos bein b'shvil gufam sheishamesh ha'adam letzarich atzmoy bein b'shvil mekoymam sheroitz l'shevet b'mekoymon uvein letzarich hakeli atzmoy shlo yiganev shlo yishaver avol shlo letzarich klal ein letaltilam." Okay, so that's the Chazon Ovadia. That's Chacham Ovadia's opinion. That's the Shita. That's the Halacha L'Maisa. That what? We don't move around forks, spoons, plates, and bowls, and anything like that unless there's a reason to move it. Stam moving it is Muktzeh, and you're not allowed to do that. Okay, adding on to the list of stuff that inherently are not Muktzeh at all. So far we had we had, what do we have? We had Svarim and food. Not a problem. So Rav Chaim Noeh and the Shmirat Shabbat Kilchatar, they bring down clothes and jewelry as well. Clothes does not have a din muktzeh at all. And we saw last week, and we'll look at it again outside of the Tzurba right now. I'm looking in the Laws of Shabbat, Rabbi Nachson, and I'm on page 225. And here he writes, here's some examples. He says, even clothes that you do not intend to wear on Shabbat is not considered muktzah. Towels, handkerchiefs are considered clothing. They're not muktzah. Soiled garments are not muktzah. A plastic covering that you use to cover the hat or the rubbers, the galoshes, also not muktzah. A bathing suit is not muktzah. Clothing down the line is not muktzah. Okay? Here, listen to this one. A button that fell from one's clothing. Button. You had a button on your clothing, on your shirt, and it fell. Is not considered a muktzeh.
You have no use for it.
It was useful when it was on your thing. It's not. It was started off not being muktzeh. It remains not muktzeh. It's similarly if pearls. You have a pearl necklace. Your daughter has a pearl. Your wife has a pearl necklace. It rips from a string on Shabbat. Although it may not be restrung, the pearls may be collected and are not considered muktzeh. Jewelry, clothing, not muktzeh. Okay? So that's straight up the halachot regarding over here. Let me just see 1 second. I put something more. 33 and 35 over here. So yeah, we talked about food. We'll go more into the food as well, but food as well. So we said food, svarim, clothes, and jewelry are not muktzeh at all, and you could always move them even for no reason. Other klishim lachtim laheter, you can only move if you have a reason, and the three reasons that exist are: I would need to use it, I want its space, or I want to protect it. Okay, fine. That's the chazara on kli shemalachtoi leheter. Then the next topic that we looked at last week, and we're on page 291 in the chazara, where Muktzeh machmat chesroin kis. Okay, which means something is muktzeh because it's a very expensive item. All right? So we had the Mishnah in the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat that told us, page 291 in the back, in the review of last week's shir. A large saw, the blade of a plow, a launderer's sprinkler, a shoemaker's knife, a butcher's knife, a carpenter's draw knife may not be moved on Shabbat. So it's a special instrument. So as jewelers, Rabbi Yosef, you have a certain instrument you just use for jewelry, for diamonds, or for this, or for that, and you just use it for that. You don't go around and say, okay, here's my bread. I need to smear some peanut butter on it. Let me go stick this thing in there. You don't ever do that, right? So it's something that you value, right? And you won't use it for anything else except its intended use. This is simply the way the Gemara seems to be saying is what's called Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes. Well, the loop is more of I don't know if it's an instrument. Okay, let's say yeah. Let's say if you only use it for dining, you don't use it for anything else. Yeah, it's going to be Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes. Yeah. Anything that you value and specifically won't use it for anything else, that's considered Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes. But so over here, and says the Tosfot in review number 2 in Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes, Tosfot Shulchan Aruch, one must not move this carrier muktzah even l'tzarech gufo. You can't move it. Not l'tzarech gufo, not l'tzarech mikomo. Definitely not to protect it. You cannot move muktzah that is Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes. The Rambam says any utensil that one is careful to preserve its value is Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes. That's the way the Rambam defines it. Any utensil, any keli, that you are careful the way you use it and how you put it and what you do with it in order to make sure it doesn't get ruined, that's considered Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes. The Beit Yosef
I have knife that someone use.
Yeah.
Even a kitchen knife.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So then I gonna never use the kitchen knife on,
So he'll use the ones he's not so worried about. Yeah.
You have to use the cheaper knife because the one.
If you put value to this and you don't use it for anything else except for this one thing,
I use it for cutting, but I don't use it. I mean, it's not a.
so we said a large saw, the blade of a plow, a laundry sprinkler, a shoemaker's knife, a butcher's knife, the Mila knife. Okay. So you're asking if a klisha malachti leheter can become Muktzeh Machmas Chesron Kes. We're gonna get there. That's the Machlekes Achrayim. Very good. Okay. So, but first, the Beit Yosef, Magen Avraham, Mishnah Mura, Rav Yitzchak Yosef, they all say Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes is subjective. It's dependent on whether or not the owner is careful to avoid damage to the object. Okay. So you hear this, Rabotai? Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes. Muktzeh because something is so valuable. There is no set definition to it. It's really dependent on the person how they use it, right?
Is it Muktzeh for everyone?
Last week. So you're saying it's my item, but someone else is going to use it now?
Right.
It goes
Can
by
they
the
move
owner.
it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I'll have to double check, but I don't think so. I think once it's his, why are they even touching it? Right? It's designated. He's not going to want anyone else to touch it. So why are they touching it?
It might not be important to me, so it's important to them. But for me, it's like, okay, I need the space.
So why would you touch something that's important, that's not yours, that's important to them? You shouldn't be touching it at all. Forget the Muktzeh part.
So you're saying it wouldn't be allowed then? I see. So it's not important.
I think he
to them.
establishes the Muktzeh for it, for sure. I'll double check on that, but that's a good question. So, but it's subjective. So here's the example: the cell phone, right? So some people take the cell phone, even though it's worth $1,000-something, they'll give it to the child to play with, right? He'll go on in, he'll press buttons, and by the time you get it, you don't know what he did, right? And you can't seem to fix it, but you give it back to the child, and they'll fix it for you, right? And some people, absolutely not. It's my cell phone. I'm not giving it to anyone. It's $1,000. So right there, for one person, that cell phone will be Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes, and to the other person, it'll just be Muktzeh because it's a klisha malachta leiser. Okay, so you're dependent of how the person views the item that he has. There's an interesting Magen Avraham. We're on page 291 in the bottom. Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes in the review on 5. Magen Avraham writes the writing paper that you write on, is Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kes. So it says Rami that the historical fact, we'll take a look at that right now. The historical fact is that in the olden days, writing paper was a very expensive item. And you didn't use it for anything else. You didn't just give it to the kids and say, keep busy with this, take some crayons and just, you didn't do that. Right? Writing paper was very much valued. It was protected. It was watched. So it says the Magen Avraham, writing paper, and the writing paper should be kli shem lachtoi lister. But he says, no, it's going to be muktzeh, machal, cheser, and kiss because it's valued. The Pri Megadim, though, says paper is only muktzeh, machal, cheser, and kiss if one is particular, not used for other purposes. But by default, it's not muktzeh. So says the Pri Megadim. Pri Megadim says that perhaps it's not muktzeh, and only if the person values it, which is what we've been saying up until now. It goes in front of the person values it. Page 292 on the top C. Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata. Only particularly expensive writing paper is muktzeh, machmat, cheser, and kiss. Regular writing paper is a kli shem lachtoi lister. Moshe Feinstein, he writes, writing paper is muktzeh, machmas, cheser, and kiss even today. So Rav Moshe Feinstein, right, writing this in the late 1900s, right, or 1970s, 1980s, and he's writing that paper is still muktzeh, machmas, cheser, and kiss. We'll take a look outside of the Tzurba for one moment. Oh, so right, the stationary, special letterhead type of thing.
Even some notebooks that have the very, very good quality paper.
Very high quality paper. Okay, let's take a look at the Yalkut Yosef outside for a moment. And he says over here, I'm looking on page 210 in the Yalkut Yosef Hebrew English edition on Shabbos 2, and he writes as follows. It's permissible to handle blank writing paper on Shabbat in our day and age, since it's not such a valuable item that one would not consider using it for any purpose other than writing. So he's saying that it's not muktzeh, mutzer l'taltel b'Shabbos, blank paper. Okay.
Maybe the average paper, but if you have like a $20 notebook or something,
You're 100% right.
You don't want to use it for everything.
Right. So if you have paper that you value and you protect, and you're saying that's going to be muktzeh, machmas, cheser, and kiss. But otherwise, paper in general would be considered today not muktzeh. And in the laws of Shabbat, Rabbi Nachson, on page 240, he writes over here, writing paper. So he writes, writing or printing paper is a kli shem lachtoi lister. Since nowadays it's very easy to obtain such paper, and people are not particular about it. Unlike many years ago when paper was something that was expensive and not as common. Paper that has a company or personal stationery printed upon it, it's still considered kli shem lachtoi lister, even if it's also used for other use, even if it is also used for other uses, such as being used as a bookmark. A notebook that one has began to write in is not considered muktzeh at all, even though there are blank pages in it, since they are subordinate to the written pages in the notebook, even if there are more blank than written pages. So okay. So you have here a couple of different dayot and a couple of different opinions. And we saw this in the Tzurba as well. We had one opinion that said it's not muktzeh at all. Pri Megadim says that it's not muktzeh at all, and the Yalkut Yosef seems to be saying the same thing. Mutzer l'taltel v'Shabbos, ner chalak. You allowed a clean paper, blank paper. You're allowed to move it. Not muktzeh at all, right? And then you have the Shita of Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata and Rav Nachson, which is no, writing paper is still muktzeh as the kli shem lachtoi lister. Okay, and you're only allowed to move it then l'tzarech mekayim l'tzarech gufay. But otherwise, you're not allowed to move it. Then his chiddush over here, if you considered it kli shem lachtoi lister, but as long as you wrote on it, and even if it's a full notebook with more pages, as long as you wrote on it, then the writing, what you wrote, the part that you can read, makes it now no longer kli shem lachtoi lister because you have written pages on it. So that's an interesting take of on that as well. But the Yalkut Yosef says you can move around blank pages of paper on Shabbat. Okay, continuing. Okay, so take a look at number 6 over here on page 292, and this was what Rami alluded to, which is, can a clean shemalachtei leheter be muktzeh machmat cheser and kiss? Okay, so an example, a chair is a kli shemalachtoi leheter. Okay, I have a very expensive chair, very fancy chair. Don't use it for anything else, but I don't know. Shoot. Okay, so it's a very special occasion, and I only use it for that, and I value it. I don't let anyone else sit in it. I don't sit in it. Nobody sits in it. Okay, it's a chair though. Can that become muktzeh machmas chesron kes or not? So, in order to become muktzeh machmas chesron kes, where do you have to start from? Is it a kli shemalachta le'iser, and then it becomes muktzeh machmas chesron kes, or could you even start from muktzeh as a kli shemalachta leheter and also become muktzeh machmas chesron kes? And that's a machlokas acronym. So if you take a look, the Shulchan Aruch Harav and Chumavadia, they both say only a kli shemalachta le'iser can become muktzeh machmas chesron kes. Okay, only a kli shemalachta le'iser can become a muktzeh machmas chesron kes. So if you have a kli shemalachta le'iser, according to Pinchas Chumavadia, if I have this fancy chair and I don't use it for anything else except for one specific thing, and I make sure no one else sits in it, and I value it, it's expensive. Doesn't make a difference.
Binoculars or something like
If it's a kli shemalachta leheter, it cannot become muktzeh machmas chesron kes because I value it. Okay, that's what our opinion over here. Just to take a look, 1 second over here. 1 and 4. Okay, hold on. In the laws of Shabbat on page 244, he writes as follows: items that are expensive and are used for performing melacha, a kli shemalachta le'iser, can be considered muktzeh machmas chesron kes. You're not allowed to move them, not l'tzarech gufa, not l'tzarech mekoymai, like we already mentioned. In order for an item to be considered muktzeh machmas chesron kes, one must determine what the intent of its owner is. If the owner would only use the item for a specific person or other purpose, then it's considered muktzeh machmas chesron kes. It does not depend on what people generally do. And here he states, there can be a difference regarding cell phones. If it is a cheap cell phone and one is not particularly careful with it, it may be moved if it's ringing on Shabbat and it's disturbing people. It's ringing, right? If the alarm came off, or I forgot to shut it, someone's calling me from work or whatever it is. It's going off. And what's it called? I can now move it, right? It's kli shemalachta le'iser. I'm allowed to move it. I need the place to be quiet, and I don't want this to be here. I can move the cell phone out of the room. But if it's $1,000 cell phone, and I'm particular about it, and I don't let people use it, and it's ringing in the room, now it's what? It's muktzeh machmas chesron kes. If it's muktzeh machmas chesron kes, you can't move it at all. It stays right there.
If I need the place, I need the place. I want to get it out of here.
That's considered. That's still considered tzarech mekoymai. We saw that 2 weeks ago. It could still be considered tzarech mekoymai. They move something out of the place because I want that place not to have that. Also considered tzarech mekoymai. Okay, so here you go. So a lot of kalim can go from kli shemalachta le'iser to kli to muktzeh machmas chesron kes, depending on how you value it. Okay, just to take a look as we continue. Okay, so here's an example. One Shabbat, someone came over to me and said, "Oh, somebody's moving the picture frames. Isn't it muktzeh? He's not allowed to move it, right? So is it? Let's say I have a fancy painting. It's valued. In fact, this is very valued. The Pito Magetot over here, it's very nice. It's big, beautiful. No one uses it for any other purpose. So maybe it's muktzeh machmas chesron kes. So the first question is, Chumavadia has to be kli shemalachta le'iser. Is this a kli shemalachta le'iser? It's not. So then if it's not, then you can move it. It never comes muktzeh machmas chesron kes if it's not kli shemalachta le'iser. So take a look at the Yalkut Yosef outside on page 177 over here. Let me read it to you. He writes as follows: paintings, tapestries, needlework hanging on the wall are not muktzeh. They may be handled or even removed from the wall for a guest to examine. You can take them off. And then they may hung back on the wall again. Even though there may be precious pictures on the category of kli shemalachta leheter, therefore cannot become Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kis, and therefore you can move them around. And here he writes in Beferish, many synagogues have large frame placards hanging on the walls with prayers, such as Bo'om D'Rabbanan, Rech Shemei, Lam Natzeach, in the form of menorah. These placards are not Muktzeh, and they may be carried about on Shabbat.
Malacha that he used to have to be used for malacha, eating malacha.
Which one? Like,
What did you just say? What did the Rabbi say?
yeah.
It has to be a cliche.
In order for it to become Muktzeh Machmat Chesron Kis,
Yeah.
it has to be Kli Shemalachta L'Isser. Okay? Kli Shemalachta L'Isser means that so this was the first year in Muktzeh, which was, Kli Shemalachta L'Isser is, it's a keli. So for example, a hammer, I usually use a hammer for a forbidden malacha. If it was be on Shabbat, how do you use a hammer? You usually use a handle to bang in nails, which is to do construction, which would be something that's usher on Shabbat. So that's considered a kli shemalachto l'isser. You usually use it for isser. That hammer, I can still move it on Shabbat if I'm going to use it for something that's permissible. I have a walnut and I want to crack it. Take the hammer, smash it. Or if I don't want the hammer to sit on my table and I want to use my table for something else, I can pick up the hammer and put it somewhere else. But I can't protect that hammer. Meaning that if it's outside in the rain, it's about to rain, stuff like that, I technically cannot just go take it and bring it inside the house.
Even if it's gonna get rusty.
Even if it's going to get rusty. Now, there are ways to do it. You can say, oh, I want to use a walnut. I want to, and you can pretend you want to crack the walnut. You come home, you find that you don't have a walnut, still fine. You could have bring it in that way. Okay? A klisha melachto leheter is an item that is usually used for a permissible malacha on Shabbat. Examples are such as a chair, a table, any utensil that is permissible, that you can move, fork, spoon, knife for food, plates and stuff like this. These are all kalim. The melachta is leheter, so you can move them around to use them. Move it around if you need the place, and move it around to even protect the item. But you're not allowed to move it around, just stamp to move it around. Means that on Shabbat, I cannot take this chair and just walk like this the whole time with them, doing whatever I want, lifting weights with chairs. You can't do that because it's for no reason. Right? You can't fidget around with them. You can't fidget around with them because it's Kli Shemalachta Leheter is only moving for these three reasons. Stuff that's not considered Muktzeh at all was food, clothes, jewelry, and Sfarim. Those are the four items that are not considered Muktzeh at all, and you can move around all day. So if you want to move around something on Shabbat and you want to fidget with something, you move the sefer or move the apple, okay? Because those are not considered at all to be Muktzeh. You're allowed to move them around. Muktzeh Machmas Chesron Kis was another level up in Muktzeh, which was if I have a Kli Shemalachta L'Isser, I have this hammer, but this hammer is not stam hammer. This hammer, a titanium hammer that has diamonds on it. I don't know. It's really expensive, and and I don't let anybody use it, and I'm protecting it, and it's like this and like that. That you can't even move. If you wanted to use it for a walnut to crack open, if you need the place, you cannot move it. You cannot move it to protect. You cannot move it at all. So if you see how we could move it, there are ways to move it, but not normally. You cannot move it. Now it's sorry, now it's sorry, not mechamel itself. You can't move those around. Okay.
So you said picture frames are allowed to move, right? On the wall.
Yes.
And regular pictures 4x6 is okay to look around.
Yes. Pictures by nature is a kli shemalachta leheter. It cannot become muktzeh machmas chesron kis. That's what the Yalkut Yosef writes. That's Chamabadan's opinion on that matter. Okay. And then the Orchot Shabbat wants to say perhaps it depends on the size, if you have a place for it, and other stuff like that. But we gave you the halacha as it's brought down by Chacham Ovadia. Okay, so that was the chazara of last week's shir, and now with some new haras. And now we're going to start the next part of the shir, which is the new part for today. So now we're going to go into Muktzeh Machmat Gufay. Okay, Muktzeh Machmat Gufay. What does this mean? So on page 269, Rabotai.
Not to be confused with Tzurba.
Right, not to be mixed up with a Tzurba Gufay. Muktzeh Machmat Gufay. Machmat Gufay means literally because of itself, right? intrinsically muktzeh. Why? And what's going on here? It's an object that in general has no use in its current state. It's not something that's usable, right? It's not a keli. It's not food. That's considered muktzeh machmat gufa, muktzeh due to its essence, what it is itself. Very good, like a stone. Okay. The Gemara, by the way, never gives this lashon muktzeh machmat gufa, but in halacha we give it this definition. But let's take a look in the Gemara, Masechet Shabbat, Kuf Chaf Dalet Amud Aleph, source 29 on page 269. The Gemara says, we learned in the Mishnah, you cannot prop a pot with a piece of wood, and you cannot prop a door open with a piece of wood. Now, why not? Why can't you move a piece of wood?
Unless it was prepared before.
Moving the wood should be permitted because an object whose primary function is forbidden use is permitted both for the purpose of utilizing the object itself and for utilizing the place. Why can't I move a wood? If it's klisha melachto le'isser, I'm allowed to move it if I have a reason to move it, if I'm using it for something permissible. To prop open the door, why can't I prop open the door with a piece of wood if it's a klisha melachto le'isser? So the Gemara says, no, that's when the ikataris keli aleph. It's when it has a definition of being a utensil. But here, the leika taret kelio. There is no keli here. Meaning a piece of wood is a piece of wood. It wasn't fashioned into something yet. Now into a door stopper, it wasn't fashioned into a pencil, it wasn't fashioned into anything. It's just a block of wood. Right. That is muktzeh machmat gufa. Because it's not a keli yet. Take a look at the Rambam. The chol she'enu keli, source 30, going avonim, like stone and money and rods and beams. You're not allowed to move them at all. Now let's start Mekayma, now let's start Gufay, not Mechamal. You can't move them. Muktzeh machmat gufay, they can't move. Talking about designating and stuff, and hopefully shortly. But let's take a look at the Shulchan Aruch. Davar she'ein bo shaychus keli kigoin tzeiros, such as pebbles or avonim or stones, even though they're right to be used to close a keli, to close a pot with it. Aser l'taltila. They're not allowed to move them. Chol she'ein keli klal. Aser l'taltila. Feel it's our gufo. Kol shekain. Let's start with Mikayim, says the Rama. So a stone. I have a pot, right, and I want to cover it, and I don't have a cover, but I found a big stone. I have a big stone. You have a big stone in the backyard. I want to cover my pot with it. Can't do it. Can't do it. The stone is muktzeh machmat gufo. You're not allowed to move it. Okay. So we're going to get into the designation. So take a look at some of the things that are considered muktzeh machmat gufoy. Yalkut Yosef in source 32. Muktzeh machmat gufoy. Who called davar she'einu keli? Something that's not a keli. And it's not something that's edible for a person or an animal. Okay? And it wasn't designated before Shabbat. All right? And we'll talk about that. For example, what are some examples? Avon, stone. Not only that, but also baking powder. Baking powder. No one can eat baking powder in its raw state, right? Baking powder is not edible in the current state. Animals. We saw animals were muktzeh, remember? So animals are muktzeh because machmat gufay. There is no usage for them, right? Baalei chaim.
Baking powder is muktzeh?
What?
Baking powder is considered muktzeh?
Yeah, muktzeh machmat gufay. You can't even move it.
But people can brush their teeth with it. Huh?
So you'll have to designate it. That's baking soda. Okay. Baking soda, he's saying. Baking soda is different than baking powder. Okay. Buttons that were not attached to clothing. Okay, buttons. You have a button in a button drawer. It's muktzeh machmat gufay. You can't move that. You can't touch that. You can't move it. a dead body, money. Okay, here's a very controversial one: secular newspapers. Okay, by the way, the Chamavadia held that secular newspapers are muktzeh machma gufa. You're not allowed to handle a secular newspaper on Shabbat. In the note, in note 15, it brings from Moshe Feinstein that in homes where newspapers are read on Shabbat due to ignorance, they are not muktzeh. Rabbi Yishal Pinchas Bodner writes that they would not be muktzeh for those who will follow more lenient rulings concerning reading newspapers on Shabbat. The Chamavadia says if you're planning to use the newspapers to wash the windows then maybe it wouldn't be considered muktzeh machmat gufay. Maybe there is something that you could do with it.
What if it has both the Bar
Yeah.
Torah and secular things in the same
Right,
newspaper?
we'll have to take a look at that in the next year, hopefully. Earth, wood, paint, beams, rods, and the like. So all these things are not usable. They're not kalim. They're not usable. All these things are what's considered muktzeh machmat gufa. You can't touch them. You can't move them. You can't do anything with them on Shabbat. So here comes now the question: what about uncooked food?
Potatoes.
So I got potatoes. Good question. Potatoes. Are they usable on Shabbat in its raw state? Furthermore, what about meat? Raw meat. What about
It's not-
raw fish?
Fish is muktzeh, but meat is not.
So let's take a look at the sources and then talk about today's halakha based on the sources. So let's see. I think Rabbi Badner brings it here. Okay, let's take a look. Let's start with source number 33, page 270. Oh yeah,
Sugar.
move the flour.
Yeah, no, I'm saying to get to the sugar, I had to move the flour. I didn't know if I can move the flour.
You're right. You have to do it, but you have to do it tiltum outside or something. We'll have to see how you can move muktzeh machat gufay. All right. Anyway, Tana Rabbanon. The Rabbanon said, "Dog maliach. If you have salted fish, mutzilatatzeloi. You can move salted fish. Right? What's lox? It says salted salmon. Okay. People eat salted food, salted fish. That's fine. But a dog that is no salted, you're not allowed to move it. All right, good question. What about sushi? Basar, whether it is salted or whether it's not salted, whether it's raw or not, mutzer says the Gemara. Okay, apparently, raw unsalted meat was something that people ate in the times of the Talmud. All right, so we're going to talk about that in a minute, right? So says the Shulchan Aruch, look at the Shulchan Aruch, basar chai, raw meat, even if it's plain, and there's no salt in it at all, you're allowed to move it because people can chew it. Okay? Even if it's spoiled meat, you can still move it because it's edible for the animals. Then said the Shulchan Aruch, if it's a salted fish, if it's not salted, aser it's aser because it's not used for anything. It's not fish for any use. Says the Taz, unsalted fish is aser because you're not allowed to move it because it's not even fit for dogs. Right? It's not even fit for dogs. Now, the Magen Avraham, he wants to, differentiate between human and animal food. Meaning he's saying if you bought this human food, right, and now you're saying it's not good, but it's still good for the animals, Magen Avraham says that's not enough. I mean, animal food you can move if it's for animals. But if human food is no longer edible for humans, you cannot say it's just good enough for the animals and that should be fine, you can still move it. He wants to sort of stop that. Saying like, if it's not good for humans, it becomes muktzeh, because you didn't originally get it for the animals. And the Kol Elio, Mordechai Elio, was asked this question: are uncooked fish muktzeh, despite being fit for cat food? So he wrote, uncooked fish are muktzeh, as they're not edible for humans. Similarly, there's no justification to move them on as cat food, as no one buys fish, straight up fish, for cat food. So therefore, he doesn't want you to move it, even though it could be eaten by a cat, but you didn't originally buy it for the cat, so you shouldn't be able to move it. That's what the Magen Abraham and the Kol Eliyahu, they want to be saying. Allah says not like that. What? Yeah, we're getting sushi in a moment. But before that, we have to define this. Lemaisa, if I have human food that no one can be eaten by humans, but can still be eaten by animals, is it muktzeh or not? So Magen Abraham, Kol Yal wanted to say, yes, it is muktzeh, because you didn't get it for animals. But Halakha L'Ma'aseh said, we don't say that. What we do say is that as follows. Food that is only fit for animal consumption is not considered muktzeh. Even foods that were slaughtered and they weren't slaughtered properly, or chicken that was accidentally cooked with milk, are not considered muktzeh, since they can give it to one's animal or to a non-Jew. So we have the halakha is, like simply the Shulchan Aruch seemed to be saying, and the Taz said, that as long as it's fit for consumption for somebody, right, for an animal, it's still not muktzeh. As long as it's fit for consumption for somebody, including animals. All right, we'll have to see, does it have to be your animal? Does it have to be, could it be your neighbor's animal? Could it be a wild, it could be an animal at the other side of town? Okay. We'll have to see. We'll have to see.
Dogs when you put some animal in the wild, what do you?
It has to be, we'll see, it has to be something that's available, and it has to be in your city. But we'll get to there shortly. Okay, now, that's regarding food that went bad or something like that. Now, what about today's day and age? Can one move around raw meat on Shabbat? Times of the time they ate raw meat, apparently. Can we move around raw meat today? So the Aruch HaShulchan and the Aruch HaShulchan brings the halacha for us is that all raw meat is muktzeh, as we do not eat raw meat at all. Says the Aruch HaShulchan that nowadays we don't eat raw meat, therefore it's muktzeh. And guess what? The Ben Ish Chai in the second year Pasha Pukadei also says the same thing. Raw meat today is muktzeh, you can't move it. Also, Shmirat Shabbat Kinchata also agrees with this. However, Yalkut Yosef, the more you learn Chacham Ovadia's opinions, for lack of better explanation, but I'll try to explain the way I see it, and I might be 100% wrong, but I see him as a purist. When he learns the Talmud, and he learns the Bet Yosef, and he learns the Shulchan Aruch, he sees the halacha as it's written. And listen, this is what it says, this is how it goes. Don't start flipping things around. Like, in a pure form of understanding it and bringing it out. Look what he writes. In the Yalkut Yosef, his son writes as follows. It's permissible to hand raw meat on Shabbat, whether it's beef, chicken, or dove, and whether or not it has already been salted. Raw meat is not muktzeh, since it's edible, and some people regularly eat raw chopped meat with added salt. Okay, even if the meat is frozen solid, it may be handled on Shabbat, since it can be defrosted and eaten. So that's what he says about raw meat. Raw meat can still be moved around today. Chicken also, he said. So very good. Straight tartar. So he writes over here, some restaurants, this is in the Laws of Shabbat, Rabbi Nachson, he writes, some restaurants, they serve raw meat, sliced very thinly, and they're known as beef tartar or beef carpaccio. Okay, so and it's served as an appetizer. So it's not entirely uncommon to eat raw meat. So raw meat serves beef tartar. So beef tartar is raw meat. Okay, so you ever saw it on the menu? You didn't know beef tartar. It sounded interesting. You took it. You ate raw meat. Okay, so you're allowed to move that. Now, so that's against Aruch HaShulchan, against the Ben Ish Chai and others who say that nowadays raw meat is not eaten. Elgar says no, it's eaten and it could be moved. Okay, what about fish nowadays? What about fish nowadays? So here you have a Shash Shuva b'Mareh Habazak, and he writes that today Yom Rabim Oichlem Dog Chai, right? Especially in the restaurants, the sushi. If you had fish that was ready to be eaten in this way, raw, at time when Shabbat came in, then even if you only eat it as a last resort, ain't a Muktzeh Shabbat. It's not Muktzeh on Shabbat. So he wants to take it and say that today fish is eaten raw. You had sushi recently. You had raw sushi, raw fish sushi. So people eat it. So, however, the Yalkut Yosef takes the opposite approach. Remember, the Talmud said, what did the Talmud say? Raw fish can't move. And he writes that. I don't know, this one came out in the 2000s. Raw fish, however, is considered inedible on Shabbat and is in the category of Muktzeh Machmat Gufo, as such, it will not be handled at all. Someone needs to remove something from the freezer, but a package of frozen meat is blocking his way. He may move the meat in order to it is forbidden, however, to move raw fish, as explained above.
See, people eat it, so I can say it's
Okay, so very good. Lamaisa, first of all, I was told by restaurant owners, that not every raw fish is considered sushi grade fish. Okay? Meaning if you're gonna give people just some raw fish and put it into sushi, you're gonna get everybody sick. There's certain types of fish that are known as sushi grade fish. And those are the fish that can be used in sushi. Okay? So you would have to know if that's the fish you have.
It has to be prepared before Shabbat.
It has to be ready to be eaten on Shabbat.
Rice and
No. It doesn't have to be with the rice and everything yet. It has to be that this is sushi grade fish that's ready to be eaten. Ready to go. You can take and cut and do what you need to do. Right? But so the Lamaisa, most fish that you go to the fish market, you pull out a fish, right? You go to Bingo and you see the raw fish there. I don't know if that's sushi fish. I don't know if you can use that. You'll take that salmon and say, hey, I'm gonna throw it into sushi. Ellie, is that what they do? They get special fish, right? Sushi grade fish. You have a thing that you can say that you can move on Shabbat because that's edible. But stam fish that you get from the fish market, from the store, that's definitely not edible raw, and therefore you cannot move it on Shabbat. So I think you have to really look into the distinction of what it is. And perhaps you can say the same thing with meat. I don't know. He seems to be saying meat is okay completely. Meat, chicken, and
nowadays they say chicken
don't eat it raw.
taking a big risk with eating it raw.
So then if you use
Eggs too.
so same thing with eggs. Eggs we say people eat it raw. All right?
They're taking a risk.
I think every step you take is another risk. Okay.
But it's more healthy.
All right, take a look at page 273, source number 40. Page 273, source number 40. Yeah, listen, I remember before my bar mitzvah, my father made me take raw egg with a little bit of salt. One shot. Once my mitzvah, I did it for like a week or two and I never did it again. That's it. Okay. Any food item which cannot be eaten in its present form on Shabbat is not classified as food and is muktzeh. Therefore, uncooked rice, you have a bag of rice, you're not going to move it. It's muktzeh machmat gufoy. Uncooked dried beans or dried peas, flour, yeast, dough, uncooked spaghetti, they are all muktzeh. Any food item that cannot be used on Shabbat, that needs to be processed, cooked, and stuff like that, you can't move them on Shabbat. You can't move them. We'll have to learn how do you move muktzeh that you can't move. We'll have to learn how to move them. But right now, you have to know that they're muktzeh. Similarly, processed foods require cooking, right? Mashed potato mixes, cake mixes, right? You have the Duncan Hines box. Muktzeh machmat gufay. Can't move it on Shabbat. Dessert mixes, popping corn. Okay, they're all muktzeh. Continues. Vegetables which require cooking in order to become edible are muktzeh. All right, so Rami's example of the raw potatoes, the sweet potatoes, the turnips, the eggplants. They're all muktzeh. Vegetables used mainly for cooking but eaten by some people without cooking are not muktzeh. Even if you bought those for cooking. For example, let's say carrots. Majority of the time you eat carrots cooked, but you could eat carrots raw, right? So even if I went to the store and I say I'm buying this to make oshpah, which means I'm going to cook them, I can still move them on Shabbat because it is edible in its raw state. Right. So you see, Abotai, how many things you got to be careful that it's not just stam. I go and I can move things around. What? You see how many things you're careful about?
The note 25 says a good thing over there about frozen food.
Go ahead.
If it's
Frozen
defrosted,
food that is edible after being defrosted is not muktzeh. That's correct. So if I have a big challah that I put into the freezer, I can take it out on Shabbat. The question would be, if I'm taking it out towards the end of Shabbat, which no way going to defrost before the end of Shabbat, then it may not be to take it because I'm preparing for the weekday. Okay. Let me just see what he says over here. Anything else? Okay, he writes over here, I'm outside of the Tzurba for a moment. Raw wheat is not considered muktzeh since it can be chewed. Raw barley is considered muktzeh. Guess it's not used. Raw egg, it depends. I don't think it's raw egg. If raw oats are not used and in its raw form, it's muktzeh then. Machmat gufay. A raw egg is not considered muktzeh. Some people swallow it raw. Okay.
I can't take a raw egg out of the chicken coop.
Well, that's a whole different story. Your chicken coop with that day, whatever. Okay. Raw tea leaves, coffee, chocolate powder are not considered muktzeh because they simply become edible by adding water to it. Right? In a heterotic way, you put water into it, and they're no longer a problem, and therefore they could be they're not considered muktzeh. Okay? Those are some of the ideas over here. Now, here comes the next case of muktzeh machmat gufay. What about sales catalogs? Okay, so what is it? You're getting in the mail the magazine that they're selling you things, brochures, right? They have in the olden days, the Costco used to get the Sears magazine and the J.C. Penney and the Macy's, and it come with a lot of stuff, right? A catalog that shows pictures of items for sale is not considered muktzeh machmat gufay, but it's a klisha melachta le'ester, and may only be moved l'tzarach gufay l'tzarach mekayma. Rav Moshe Feinstein adds that if one usually uses them during the week for a permitted purpose, for children to sit on, then they are not muktzeh. All right, look at Rav Moshe Feinstein of the Hinigus Moshe. He's asked catalogs, sheyesh v'hem tmunos, about stuff that they're selling. L'moshel catalog Chaveret Sears, okay, Sears catalog. All right, got into the Igros Moshe. Maybe a muktzeh b'Shabbos. So he writes, these books are muktzeh since they are designated for trade. It's klisha melachta le'heser because it's made to do business, which you can't do on Shabbat. But if they're used during the week for children to sit on, then they're not muktzeh. The Dirshu edition of Mishnah Berurah, they bring their Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said, what about not a catalog, but rather leaflets or papers that they give out with businesses, flyers. Okay? Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach held that they were muktzeh gomer alt muktzeh machmat gufay, because there's no purpose for it, since they're commonly discarded. They're not a keli at all. It's not a klisha melachta. It's not a book or something like that. It's just a piece of garbage. Use for it at all. Therefore, it's muktzeh machmas gufay. You can't move it at all. Unlike the catalog that you can move, you need the place or you need it. There we go. That was Chamalad just said. So let's take a look at that. The Alkid Yosef on page 205 He writes as follows. He writes as follows. If someone enjoys looking through store catalogs that display pictures of merchandise along with the prices, then the catalogs are not Muktzeh on Shabbat because he likes looking on them. So it's a tzarech gufay, right? Even if you say it's kim shalach, so you could tzarech gufay. I'm using. I'm looking at. I'm enjoying to look it on it. Although one must be careful to look at the pictures and not read the captions, meaning don't read the prices and stuff like that, right? Because that might be a problem on Shabbat. That is a problem on Shabbat to start reading the prices and stuff like that. If the sole purpose of the catalog is advertising and not just to look at, right? Then it's muktzeh and may not be handled. 1 second. That's that. And then another one he brings over here, and that's the one you mentioned. Here we go, page 179, look, 44. Here we go. Some place can rule that secular newspapers are muktzeh on Shabbat. Other place can rule that they are not muktzeh since they are fit to use to clean windows. In any case, one should not have such newspapers in one's home at all, for fear that one will be tempted to read them. All right, so you gotta be careful. At the end of the day, a catalog seems to be a cliche malach to the Isser, and you're allowed to move the tzarech from coming to the gufay. So if I'm just looking at, I pursue it, and it's not just sales stuff in there. They have like an article or something like that. Then it seems you could open it and look at it. Otherwise, if it's really just for advertising, like I'll tell you what, like the Uline. You ever get the Uline book? It's like a huge book with like 1 million products in there. They're not doing anything but advertising things. According to what Chamavaj is, what Yitzchak Yosef is writing the Al Yosef, you shouldn't be able to look at those books at all because those are completely there's no use for them, right? Unless you need to move it away because you don't want it to be in that place. But newspapers and such like that, second newspapers, he's taking a strict approach and saying not to use them at all. Okay, fine. Let's see if we can start. Actually, this next part. The next part is really one big sugya. So let's start an introduction on this next part, and then B'ezrat Hashem next week we'll pick up with it inside. Okay. The question is as follows. So far, what we've seen is Muktzeh Machmat Gufay. I have a piece of wood. I have a stone. I have raw fish, or whatever it is. It's not usable, right? So therefore, we said its essence is Muktzeh, you can't move it. But let's say I want to use it for a permissible thing on Shabbat. I want to use that piece of wood to prop my door open. I want to use this big stone to cover my pot, to cover my barrel, or whatever it is. How can I go about doing this? How can I go about using this unfinished item, right? This not made into a vessel item. How can I go about and use it on Shabbat? So we're going to come out that there's some ways of doing it. According to some, you have to make some sort of maaseh, some sort of action to that item. For example, if you want to use a stone or a piece of wood, maybe sand it down. But we're going to see the halakha maaseh, what you really have to do is to designate it. Okay? To designate it as something that I want to use. Now you have to see, do I have to designate it verbally? Do I have to say I'm using it? Do I have to point? Do I have to verbally say it? Is mental designation enough? Then the question further is it the designation have to be permanent? Meaning, am I using this wood forever for the door stopper, or can I just designate it for one Shabbat? Right? So these are the many factors that play into this designation of how do you designate an item that should be Muktzeh Machmat Gufay. There's no use for it. It's not a keli. And how a person can go about designating or making it useful for Shabbat. The next part would be, what about shells and peels? Right? Like we spoke on Shabbat. Right, with the Vilna Gaon, and he had the peels or the shell that from the item of the food, and then he moved it. So Let's say I'm peeling an egg. Once I peel and I take the peel off, do I have to drop it right away? Can I put it down? Where do I put it down? Do I put it right away in the garbage? Can I leave it on the table? If I leave it on the table, can I now take it off the table? Do I have to leave a little piece of the egg on it? Do I put it in a bowl and I put a little piece of fruit in the bowl and then I put the eggshells on it and then I discard it? And then we're going to see another topic is that if you have Muktzeh, but it's disgusting, you can move it away on Shabbat. Can I create that on Shabbat? Meaning, can I put my Muktzeh in one place and I make it disgusting and then, now I can move it out because all the Muktzeh is there. Can I eat a bunch of eggs and just throw it on the table and fruits and all this, and now it's all disgusting and now I can move it over? Or I'm not allowed to do that l'chatchila to start it off. Okay, so all those are some of the factors, B'ezrat Hashem, that we will see in more depth. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll go through it next week. This is where we'll stop for this week. Again, this class was Leon Nishmat, Nikadam Bat Osnat, and Shishon Michael Chayil. We have 10 people, right? Rabbi Hanina Bekasho Omer, Asa Kadosh Baruch Hu, Lezakot Yisrael. Tika Chibel Em Torah Mitzvot Shneimar, Adonai Hafetz, L'Ma'an Tzedko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir.